Magic is glad to have you on the webinar on Finance for Startup and Introduction to Business Plan Advanced session. We have Magic team over here along with the industry leader and expert board of director DIEMS team and the core team. Hi, I'm Yogesh Taudre and I will be the driver for today's session. I would like to begin with a short presentation on Magic journey. Thank you for watching the video. Now, I would like to call Mr. Rohit Auti, CEO of Magic, to share his thought on today's advanced session. Over.
Thanks, Yogesh, and thanks everyone for joining. Uh, First of all, I would like to start with acknowledging the efforts of DMs to host this session and especially for showing their passion and enthusiasm for innovation and startup related activities. Uh, Talking about this session, I won't take too long. It was very obvious when we introduced this topic last time that understanding of the best practices related to finance and accounts, uh, having a sensitivity and familiarity with what business plan means. These are very important constituents of getting into a startup and eventually translating it to an enterprise. Uh, Conventionally, when somebody gets into a new business, especially in the startup world where most of the people are not from the finance background, this is the last thing that comes to our mind. And it typically comes to our mind when we end up in a problem. And I'm sure Prasanna will talk more about it. But the reason we wanted to have this done at the right time, especially when the momentum is picking up and so many of you are connected with us, was that we always need to keep in back of our mind that while we build our startups, we build our enterprises, how critical it is to also reflect the same on the books in the right way. Because as startups grow and they start interacting with the outside world, especially investors or anyone else, the yardstick of success is the financial reports and how well they actually can put together their business plans and eventually evolve them as per the dynamics and the way they are progressing. So this is a very, very critical topic, and I feel we are very, very fortunate to have someone like Prasanna to talk about it. So I hope, just like last time, we all have a great time on this session. It will be a very interactive session, as Prasanna always prefers it to be. And I would say just let's keep learning. So with that, I'll give it back to Yogesh to take this session forward.
Thank you, Rohit, to brief us about the challenges faced by startup. Now, I would like to call Director of DIEMS, Mr. Ullas Shirkar, to share his thought on today's session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Today's resource person, Prasanna Pongam, his name is resembles to his personality. He's a very Prasanna person like that. And I'm very sure that this 1 hour will be have a very great takeaway for all of us. Takeaway is not only with the McDonald's, takeaway is basically thought process. I'm really thankful to Rohit, Yogesh, Magic team for arranging this session, which will be helpful to the students. Not only students, but all the faculty members also who are joining this session. I do have some or other experience of business. And the major reason of failure in my business is lack of the accounting knowledge. On paper, everything is profitable, but when actually when the money comes, there are a lot of other things, and I not calculate anything. So definitely, once we take the admission to engineering, everybody wants to have certain one or other dreams. The very first dream is to get a good package, or we should have a good startup, a good business, and definitely. Yesterday, I want to share one thing. Yesterday, day before yesterday, I was talking with Mr. Jaiswal, who is from Lucknow, was actually traveling. And when we are talking about this magic and everything, he has taken the name of Ashish sir. He's in constantly in touch with Ashish, and he's told that my students are getting benefits of magic. So magic is not only in Aurangabad or Baratwada, it has spread the wing all over the India. It's a very great thing. And I'm very sure the young team, led by Rohit, Yogesh, and other members, will definitely bring certain good shape in the life of the students to make them real engineers rather than we are actually making engineering graduates. But your support will help us to make the students engineers. Thank you once again. I wish you all the best for the future of magic. I wish you all the best for the budding entrepreneurs who are joining this. Thank you once again. Thank you. Over to you, Yogesh.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your startup journey. Now, Mr. Rajendra Shinde, Assistant Professor of DIEMS, College will introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Yogesh. I take this pleasure to introduce Prasanna Pangam here, who is a chartered accountant with more than 15 years of experience and is expertise in business process review, information system audits, transfer pricing advisory, project finance and consultancy, and he is also a certified public accountant, that is CPA, from USA, as well as a certified information system auditor, that is CISA, again from the USA. So he is a partner at Pulsule and Pangam and Company and has a deep passion for the startups. So with this, I would like to request him to begin the today's session. So Prasanna sir, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Rajendra ji, for such a nice introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So first of all, a very good afternoon to all the participants, and a special thanks to Magic Aurangabad for giving me this opportunity to share my views on the topic of business plan, financial statements, and also touching upon the startup related benefits. So as Rohit has already set the tone of this session very well. So accordingly, we will just take that thread ahead and we will discuss at length about the financial statements. And so typically the flow will be, I will just take a recap of what was discussed in the last session, because this is just a continuation of the previous session. And then we will take it up today's topic. So I will share my screen. Just to avoid the bandwidth issue, I will just switch off my video. Whether my screen is visible?
Yes.
Okay, great, fine. So I will just take a quick recap. So last session, we started with business plan. So what is a business plan? Basically nothing but a blueprint of our business, and it defines not only the goals which we want to achieve, but also the plan to achieve those goals. Then we discuss about the ingredients of the business plan. So market intelligence, product or market analysis, SWOT analysis, risk management, organization chart, capital expenditure, marketing strategies, and ultimately arriving at a detailed projected P&L depicting our business plan. So all these points were dealt in detail. After this, we discuss about financial statements. So we talk about three main financial statements. So we started, since most of the participants are non-commerce background, so we started with some basic concepts of accounting, which basis we follow. Then what are the rules of accounting which we generally use to account for our business transactions. Then we discuss about three main financial statements: profit and loss statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. So these are the three critical financial statements which depict the overall picture of our business, whether our business is doing good or bad. So typically, though our business is going good, but if the financial statements are not presented properly, ultimately we may end up facing various issues, right? So last time we discussed about profit and loss statement. So profit and loss statement is nothing but the statement which indicates the performance of our business done in a span of time. So it may be a 1 month period, 3 month period, 6 month period, or a calendar year of 12 months. So generally we prepare our profit and loss statement for 12 months to submit it to regulatory authorities. Profit and loss statement reflects the business done during the year, the expenses incurred, and ultimately what profit we have earned, right? So we discuss at length why we need to use financial statements. Then we discuss some important terms of profit and loss statement, why we need to review profit and loss statement. Then we saw a sample profit and loss statement of a private limited company, and we analyzed some of the key ratios from that profit and loss statement. And from that, we identified that there was some issue in the overall functioning of the company, because primarily, though the company was making good profit, ultimately it was having a huge operating expenses, and the ratios which we calculated brought this particular fact to the front, that there is some issue in the operations because the material consumption was high, right? So this is how we analyze our profit and loss statement, and we practically saw how we should do that. I hope the participants might have done similar analysis, taking some profit and loss statement of some other company, right? Similarly, now we are going to see balance sheet today, right? So what is balance sheet? Balance sheet, right? The name itself suggests that whatever are the balances of your business on a particular day, put it on a sheet of paper, is nothing but a balance sheet. So what are those balances? So either those are dues to your suppliers, dues you are expecting from your customers, the bank loan which you have taken, the outstanding balance of that bank loan as on a day, right? So first and foremost, balance sheet is prepared on a particular day. This is very important to be understood. So balance sheet indicates the position of our business on a particular day, right? So we can have balance sheet prepared for all 365 days, right? Because every day the position of our balance sheet will change, right? For regulatory perspective, or for submission to income tax, or under Companies Act to register of companies, we prepare balance sheet as on 31st March. But otherwise, one can prepare balance sheet as on any day of the year. So balance sheet has got two sides, liabilities side and asset side, right? So I'm just going to discuss briefly on this particular slide, and then again we are going to see a sample balance sheet of a private limited company. The way we saw profit and loss statement, similarly we are going to see a balance sheet of that same company. Okay, so liabilities and assets, now these are the terminologies which we have to understand, because those are the terms which have been used in as per our accounting principles. So liabilities are nothing but the dues, or the payment which we have to make to outside parties, right? So liabilities are dues of the business, and assets are the ownership or the receivables of the business which is going to receive from outside world. So liabilities are again bifurcated in two parts, non-current liabilities and current liabilities. So typically those dues for which we have more than 1 year to repay, right? Example, bank loan. So when we set up a new unit, we avail a term loan from bank, right? So which has got a repayment period of say 5 years or 7 years. So that means we have got more than 1 year to repay that loan to the bank out of the profit what we earn from our business. So that's why bank loan becomes a non-current liability, right? And what is a current liability? The liability which has to be paid in a year. So typically when we are into a manufacturing setup, or if we are into a service industry, we avail some services or we buy our raw material on credit from our supplier. So they get generally 30 days credit, 60 days credit, 90 days credit. So all those supplier payments will come under current liabilities. Or there are a lot of statutory liabilities, right? We have to pay GST to the government. We have to deduct tax from our suppliers or our professionals, and we have to pay that tax to the government on 7th of every month. So all these come under current liabilities, because those liabilities have to be paid within a period of 1 year. Similarly, asset side, again we have these two bifurcation. What? Non-current assets and current assets, right? So what are non-current assets? Assets which give return for more than 1 year. So typically, I am having a manufacturing unit. I put up a plant and machinery to manufacture the product which I am proposed to manufacture. Say we take the example of auto components. So I set up a big press or laser cutting machine, right? So which has got a life of 10 years, 15 years. So that means this machine is going to give me returns for more than 1 year. So that's why it becomes a non-current asset, or we also call it as a fixed asset. And what are current assets? Assets which get converted into cash within a 1 year. This is very important. So I have sold my auto components to Mahindra and Mahindra with a credit period of 90 days. Means what? That if I am selling a particular component on 1st of April, I'm going to get payment against that particular invoice after 90 days, right? So on 1st of July, that particular invoice will be paid, right? That won't be outstanding as a customer receivable. So it will get converted into cash, or it will be paid in the form of bank RTGS or NEFT. So that means what? All assets which get converted into cash within a span of 1 year becomes a current assets. Now I'm going to show a actual sample balance sheet. Is this visible?
Yes, visible.
Okay, great. So now this is how typically a balance sheet is presented. So this is ABC India Private Limited. Balance sheet as at 31st March 2019. As I already mentioned, balance sheet is a position on a particular day. So this is a position of the business as on 31st March, right? So now we will just analyze this balance sheet. Now we will first go through the balance sheet, and then we will have a lot of ratios. So we are going to see key ratios from this balance sheet, which will further help us to analyze this balance sheet. So typically try to understand that since many of the participants are a startup or they are going to have their own startup, when you are approaching an investor, angel investor or a VC, they will typically going to analyze your balance sheet in this fashion to take a call whether to invest in your business or not. So if you can have, that particular eye, that the way they are going to analyze, if you already know what ratios they are going to look into, how they are going to see my balance sheet, definitely it will help you to work upon your balance sheet well, and you can accordingly reflect that particular position diligently in your financial statements. So that's why let's discuss this in detail. So how to read a balance sheet and how to analyze whether this balance sheet is healthy or not. Okay. So let's start. So as we discussed, balance sheet has got two sides. So this is a liability side, and here it's a asset side. So this is a horizontal presentation. We can also have a vertical presentation where on the left hand side you show liabilities and on the right hand side you show assets. So let's start. So since it's a private limited company, so first thing is it is showing share capital, right? Now, can anyone answer? Maybe we can take some questions in between so that, I want to make it more interactive, or I can get the sense that whether you are able to understand what I'm explaining. So can anyone explain me why share capital is shown here under liabilities? It's a capital invested by the owner in the business. So why it is shown as a liability? What is liability? I told you that this is the amount which is owed or amount which has to be paid by the business, but it is my money, right? So why it is again shown under liability? Can anyone explain?
Because there are two reasons. First is that promoters are not part of business, and business itself is an entity, and that becomes a liability for business because promoters are basically third party for the company. It's not a company. They are not company. They are people who are investing in the company.
Absolutely. Right. So this is a very important point which we need to understand. Thank you. So you explained it very well, that typically when we talk about our business, we are different from our business, right? So I am individually might be investing in my business fund. For my business, it is a investment which that business is supposed to repay at some future date, right? So when I say I have invested in my business 40 lakh rupees, ABC Limited is saying that this 40 lakh I owe to Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C, who are maybe shareholders of this particular business, right? So at any point in time, whenever Mr. A, B, C wants to remove their investment from the company will pay that amount to them. So that's why share capital is reflected under a liability, because ultimately the company has to repay this particular amount to the owner. Thank you for the explanation. So we can see here, so this company is having share capital of 40 lakhs. Then these reserves and surplus, these are nothing but whatever profit we make every year that gets accumulated, and that is reflected under reserves and surplus. So typically we all know, or we might know, that in case of a private limited company, you are not allowed to withdraw profit as it is, right? You can withdraw profit either in the form of declaration of dividend to the shareholders. So if you don't declare dividend, that profit gets accumulated, right? And that is reflected under these reserves and surplus. Then comes this long-term borrowings. This is nothing but the term loan from bank. So this particular company has availed a loan from bank to set up their units. So this is the outstanding balance of that loan. So last year, the outstanding balance was 1 crore 48 lakhs. This year, it is 1 crore 35 lakh. That means what? The company has paid 14 lakh against the principal repayment of its borrowings, right? Then comes short-term borrowings. Now, short-term borrowings is typically a working capital. So we are going to discuss this at length because this is very important concept. What is working capital? Just to give you a brief here, that working capital is nothing but a lifeblood of the business. So if we really want to run our business smoothly, we need to maintain our working capital position properly. So for this working capital requirement also, bank gives us certain limits. We call it as working capital limit or cash credit limit. So this limit is reflected under current liabilities. Now, why it is reflected under current liabilities? Because typically, when we avail loan for setting up a unit, generally the repayment period is 5 to 7 years. That's why it is coming under non-current liabilities or long-term life borrowings. But when we avail working capital limit, which is reflected under the short-term borrowings, bank gives this particular limit for 1 year only. And then every year we have to renew that limit. So that's why it is reflected under current liabilities. If you remember the definition, what is a current liability? The liability which is paid within a span of 1 year. So that's why working capital limit is reflected under current liabilities. These duties and taxes will cover all our statutory dues like GST, TDS, profession tax, if provident fund is applicable, so that particular dues. And what is trade payable? Again, this is a terminology used in accounting terms. This is nothing but dues to our suppliers, right? So since it's a manufacturing unit, it is procuring a lot of raw material, might be some bought out items, consumables from various suppliers. So all those suppliers payments which are outstanding as on the date of 31st March 2019, those all are clubbed and shown under trade payable, right? Next comes short-term provisions. These are typically some provisions for expenses. So as I mentioned, we are preparing our balance sheet on a particular date, right? As on 31st March 2019. Now, typically what we do, we pay our workers, say, every 7th of the month, or we pay our employees every 7th of the month, right? Our electricity payment cycle is, say, 15th of the month. But since we are preparing this balance sheet as on 31st March, the March payment is not yet done, right? Because we are going to pay it on 7th of April or 15th of April. So all those expenses which are due but not yet paid will come under all these short-term provisions. Okay. So these all cover my liabilities. The money which I owe to outside world will reflect under liabilities. So out of which some are non-current, having more than 1 year repayment period, and others are current liabilities, which have to be paid within a span of 1 year, right? So this covers the liability side. Next comes asset side. So under assets, as we discussed, non-current assets, current assets. So non-current assets, mainly it has got fixed assets, right? The setup which I have done to manufacture my product, the first initial investment in factory shed, in plant and machinery, furniture and fixtures, maybe some computer equipment, printer, scanner, might be I am having some diesel generator to provide a electrical backup. So all this will come under this tangible assets. Now, what is the difference between tangible and intangible? Tangible is nothing but which can be seen, which can be touched. All such assets will come under tangible assets. So intangible assets will cover mainly your software, your IPR, right? Copyrights. So all those will come under intangible assets. Again, all these assets come under non-current because they are going to give me returns for more than 1 year. So that's why all such assets are classified under non-current assets, under that fixed assets. Current assets, so these are short-term loans and advances, maybe some advances given to employees for their some festival purpose or for some family function. So all such advances which I am going to recover from my employee, maybe from their future salary, I will cut monthly EMI. So all such amount will come under short-term loans. Stock in hand. So whatever stock I am maintaining, what stock? Stock of my raw material, might be the product which I am manufacturing that has say 15 days cycle time or 1 month cycle time. So I have some material in process, right, at any point in time. Again, I am explaining here that this particular balance sheet is prepared as on 31st March. So suppose I am having 15 days cycle time of my product manufacturing. What will happen? That on 31st March, there might be some raw material which is in the process stage. So even that process stage raw material, I will value and I will put under WIP. We call it WIP, work in progress, right? Or maybe my customer requires me to maintain some stock. So even at short notice, the customer may order some material or some product. So I have to maintain some stock of my finished goods. So raw material stock, work in progress, and finished goods. This all will come under stock in hand of raw material and WIP finished goods. Cash and cash equivalents will typically cover your physical cash balance. Nowadays, we hardly maintain any cash balance, only for some petty cash expenses, some nominal expenses. Then your bank balance, and typically if you are having some fixed deposit receipts. So all this will come under cash and cash equivalents. Now trade receivables. The name suggests. We saw this trade payable. What was that? Payable of the business. Trade receivable means what? Receivables of the business. From where the business is going to receive money? From their customers. So these are nothing but the outstanding from the customers. Whatever dues which are expected to be recovered from the customer. So again, if I'm having a 90 days credit period, means what? At any point in time, if I'm selling my auto component to Mahindra & Mahindra, my last 90 days supply will be amount or will be reflected under this trade receivable, right? Because on 1st of April, whatever supply I have done to Mahindra & Mahindra, I will get payment on 1st of July. Right? So till that time, that amount will get reflected under this trade receivable. Other current assets will typically cover, say if I am having an insurance policy for my unit and the policy period is say from 1st of October to 30th of September, right? But I am preparing this particular balance sheet as on 31st of March. So from 1st of October till 31st of March, 6 months period will cover under this particular financial year. But after 31st March up to 30th of September, so next 6 months period is not part of this particular financial year. So what I will do, I will show that 6 months insurance as prepaid insurance. I have already paid for next financial year. So that particular amount gets reflected under other current assets. Or sometimes it may happen practically, you might you be facing that you procure your raw material with 18% GST, but your output or the finished goods which you are selling to your customer might be having a different GST rate. Say it's 12%. Means what? At any point in time, you have a surplus GST balance with you, right? 6%. So that will get reflected under other current assets. And deferred tax, basically, I will not go that much into detail. This is basically a timing difference arising out of two different norms followed by under Companies Act and under Income Tax Act. So because of that, this particular deferred tax asset or liability arises. So maybe this is a bit more technical, so I will not deal with it in detail. So this is how the balance sheet is reflected. So it indicates a position of our company as on a particular day, showing what are the owing or what company owes to outside world and what are the belongings or receivables from outside world. Okay. Now we are going to analyze this particular balance sheet with some key ratios. Okay. So let me come back to the presentation. So now some key ratios. Now these ratios are such which I have selected, which are also looked by the bank or even by any investor. So this is a first ratio, debt equity ratio. So what is debt? Debt is nothing but the borrowings of the business. So if you all recollect in our balance sheet, the bank term loan, right? So in 17-18, the bank term loan was 148.91. So this is I have put in lakhs. So 148.91 lakhs. And in 18-19, it was 135.10 lakhs. So as we discussed that during the year, I have paid 13 lakhs of or almost 14 lakhs of my bank borrowing. And what is my equity? Equity is nothing but my contribution in the business. So that covers your share capital as well as the accumulated profits. Why? This is also part of my equity because I have not withdrawn this profit as a dividend. I have kept my profit within the company. So that's why it has reflected under reserves and it is also part of my equity. So this is how this ratio is calculated, debt divided by equity. Now how to interpret this ratio, right? So what does this indicate? That if I have invested 100 rupees in my business, my bank, my friends, my relatives, or maybe some private parties from whom I have availed some loan, they have invested 330 rupees in financial year 17-18 and that contribution has come down to 228 rupees. So what does it indicate? This indicates a sound position. How? That earlier I was more dependent on other funds. I was more dependent on bank. I was more dependent on my friends or some private lenders, right? Because against 100 rupees of my contribution, I was dependent for 330 rupees. But in next year, in 18-19, that dependence has been reduced. Now I am only having 228 rupees as the loan or liability from outside world against my 100 rupees contribution. So typically bank or even your investor also looks at this particular ratio. If this ratio is 1:1, that means what? That my contribution is also 100 rupees and I have availed only 100 rupees from outside world. So this shows a very strong position, right? And that's why I have put in the last that if outside parties investment is less or zero, means you are a totally debt-free company. You are not dependent on any outside party for your business finances. Your business is self-financed. So that becomes a very positive, very attractive business for any investor, be it bank, be it private equity, be it venture capital, right? So that's why this ratio is important. This is again a very important ratio. Now, typically, since we have been practicing project finance for last almost 15 years, what we see, any new entrepreneur is very enthusiastic about starting his business, right? So typically what they do, they project very high. So they expect that from day one or from first month only my turnover will be 10 lakhs or my turnover will touch 25 lakhs, right? But then one has to look at the practical aspect as well, that even if your product has a lot of potential, unless your business or your product is settled in the market, unless you know what is the competition in the market, it is very difficult to actually achieve those figures. Or sometimes what happens, that the initial projections what you have done, based on that you invest very heavily in the capital investment, or you invest very heavily in plant and machinery. So example, say you have per day 1 ton production capacity, but actually you end up actually manufacturing say 10,000 units per day. So what happens, you invested in 1 ton per day capacity plant and machinery. So your initial investment is high. Since that machine is big, its electricity consumption is high, its other overheads are high, its repairs and maintenance is also huge. So ultimately, unless you achieve sizable turnover or business, that investment becomes a hurdle for your growth. So that particular aspect is reflected in this particular ratio, that what is the proportion of your turnover or revenue against your investment in capital asset. So this turnover reflects that. Now how to interpret this? So what is the revenue? Revenue is nothing but your total sales. So let's see, I will open profit and loss statement also. Okay, so for the financial year 18-19, my turnover was 5 crore 53 lakh 18,000. Okay, so I have taken that here, right, as a revenue. And at that time, what was my fixed asset or my capital investment? That was reflected in balance sheet. Okay, so that is 98 lakh 96,970. Sorry. So I divided the revenue or the sales what I have achieved by the capital investment. 5.59 times. What does this indicate? That if I have invested 1 rupee in my plant and machinery, I managed to generate sales of 5.59 rupees. Means what? The turnover was 5.59 times more compared to my investment. So how you can use this particular ratio? So if you are into say auto component business and there is also one competitor who is also into a similar business, who is also supplying to Mahindra and Mahindra or Bajaj Auto, you can also take their balance sheet and you can see what is their fixed asset turnover ratio. If their ratio comes 10, what does that mean? That means they are managing to generate more business from 1 rupee of investment. You are managing to generate only 5 rupee 59 paise from 1 rupee of investment in capital or capex or plant and machinery. But your competitor is managing to generate 10 rupee business from 1 rupee investment within a same span of 12 months, right? So that means you are doing something wrong. Either your efficiency is poor, or either there are some issue with your machinery, it might be down most of the time, so there is some continuous repairs and maintenance. So parallelly you can also check whether your repairs and maintenance cost is high, right? Or you don't have a sufficient orders to actually occupy your plant and machinery. So all these aspects you can analyze when you look at this particular ratio, right? So that's why this ratio is very important. Next comes working capital. So again, practically I will share with you, since we have done a lot of project finance assignments. Typically, if you don't estimate your working capital requirement well, you definitely land up in trouble as you progress in your business, right? So what is working capital? So again, just to give you briefly explain this particular concept. So when I'm setting up a unit, I need two types of expenses, right? One is a one-time expense, or which is a setup expenses, right? And one is a recurring expenses. So my setup cost is nothing but putting up a unit, so maybe buying a land or leasing a land, then putting up a factory shed, then buying plant and machinery, other infrastructure, right? So all this is one-time expenses. So for that, we avail a term loan or project loan from the bank, for which we have a fixed monthly EMI. But once we have set up our unit, we need to run that unit smoothly, right? If we don't estimate our running cost well, what will happen? So take example, we will take a practical example here. So I am starting a unit, say same auto component for Bajaj Auto. I have estimated that once I sell my component to Bajaj Auto will pay me in 30 days. So accordingly, what I will do, I will prepare my project report, I will submit it to the bank, and accordingly bank will provide me some working capital finance. As I mentioned, it is called working capital limit or cash credit limit. But practically, if Bajaj Finance extends our credit limit, instead of 30 days, they extend it to 60 days or 90 days, what will happen? My recovery cycle is affected, right? Because I am expecting that whatever sale I have done on 1st of April, I will get payment from Bajaj Auto on 1st of May. But instead of that, now it will either be recovered on 1st of June or 1st of July. But then I have a monthly expenses, right? I have 10 workers working on the shop floor. I have a marketing manager. I have an account staff. I need to pay them every month, right? I need to pay their salary, their wages every 7th of the month. From where I will get that money, right? I need to pay my electricity bill every month as per my billing cycle. I need to pay my electricity bill on say 7th, 15th, 21st, right? So where I will get money from? If I don't recover in time from my customers, from where I will get money? Whether it is possible for me to pour in money every time? No, it will be difficult, right? If I am dependent on only on one business, and when I have started my business, I have already invested my savings in initial setup cost. From where I will get money to meet my recurring expenses, right? So that's why it is very important that you need to understand your working capital requirement well. Typically, one more problem which is practically faced by companies, that whenever they again prepare their project report, they expect that they need to maintain only 30 days raw material stock. But then practically what happens? Your customer, if it is a big giant like Mahindra or Bajaj Auto, they force you to maintain 60 days stock. So typically in this pandemic situation, what has happened? There is a lot of scarcity of raw materials, especially steel. So what you have to do? You have to maintain higher stock. If you are getting a good rate, what you have to do? You have to maintain a higher stock of raw material. So that means what? You earlier estimated that you will maintain only 30 days stock, but actually you are maintaining 60 days stock, 90 days stock. Ultimately, what is happening? Your funds are getting blocked, right? In that particular stock. Initially, you expected that your supplier will give you 30 days credit, but now the market scenario is such. Typically, this has practically happened since last March to 2020 when the COVID effect started. Suppliers stopped giving any credit because they were not sure when the money will be recovered from the customer. So they said, if you have money, pay us upfront and then lift the material, right? So what has happened? My earlier estimation has failed, right? Earlier I expected I will get 30 days credit, but now I have to pay upfront and then only I will get the supply from my supplier. So all these aspects have to be considered and will have to be managed. If we don't do that, what will happen? Our working capital cycle will collapse. And if that cycle collapses, even if I have orders, I have huge orders from my customer, but since my working capital cycle has collapsed, I'm not able to meet those orders, right? Unless and until I recover from my customer, whatever earlier supply I have done, unless and until I recover money against that particular supply, I'm not able to procure further material. So what will happen? I will have a tremendous gap in my cycle, right? I will have to wait. My production will be on hold, right? For say 8 days, 15 days, or maybe for a month, right? and that is going to affect the entire cycle, because anyway I can't ask my workers that okay एक महीना अभी तक कस्टमर से पैसा नहीं आया है, आप वेट करो, एक महीने के बाद आपको पगार दूंगा, right? They will say sorry, we can't survive, we will go to another company, right? So this is all what we need to analyze well. What are my recurring expenses, and if there are such changes in my estimate, how I am going to manage my recurring expenses. That entire study comes under this working capital, and that's why it is very important that one must analyze working capital requirement very well. Okay, so as we discussed what factors which affect, so what is the nature of business, whether it's a seasonal business. So in case of seasonal business, what happens? So I'm into say mango pulp processing. What I need to do, I need to procure mangoes in those seasonal period, right? So I need heavy working capital at that time, but then my supply will happen over a period, right? So I will have to maintain a good stock of mango pulp in the packed containers. So I should have that much sustenance capacity to hold my stock, because the sale will happen throughout the year, but mango pulp processing will happen only say in 2 to 3 months, from say March to May, right? What is the nature of raw material? So if the raw material is specialized material, sometimes what happens that if it's a specialized material, especially if it's an imported material, you can't order in a specific requirement. You have to order in a lot, right? If you are importing a material, you have to order 1 ton material. Whether you may require every month, say half a ton or even a 0.25 ton. But if the container size is 1 ton, you don't have any choice. You have to go for entire 1 ton. So all these aspects have to be dealt with. Process technology use. So what kind of technology you are using, what kind of finished goods you are dealing with. So whether it's say typically, again taking an example of auto industry. So what happens during a seasonal festive season period, the demand for auto two-wheelers or four-wheelers goes up suddenly, right? So during that time, I have to maintain a heavy stock of components, because my Mahindra or my customer like Bajaj may order a huge particular component during that particular season, right? Because they get a very good indication from the market that the demand will go up. So accordingly, I will have to adjust my working capital requirement. What is the competition in the market? So naturally, based on the competition, you have to maintain stock levels, and naturally that will affect your working capital. Now we are going to see actually how we should calculate working capital in this particular scenario. So working capital is nothing but the funds blocked in day-to-day cycle. So there is a formula for calculating working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. So what are current assets? As we already discussed in detail, that typically it covers your stock, it covers your receivables from customers, and it covers your cash and balance in the bank. So in this particular balance sheet, if we put all this together, our total current assets are 2 crore 15 lakh, right? And as against that, what are current liabilities? The liabilities which have less than 1 year period to pay off, right? So if we look at our present balance sheet, this is our working capital limit from the bank, our duties and taxes, our supplier payments which are outstanding, and our short-term provisions, like I mentioned, the last month's provision for say salary, workers, electricity bill, all this put together is coming to 1 crore 33 lakhs, right? So net 81 lakh 47,000 is my working capital. What does that mean? That my money is invested in my day-to-day operating cycle to the tune of 81 lakh 47,000, right? Because मुझे जो पैसा कस्टमर से आने वाला है और जो मेरा पैसा स्टॉक में अटका पड़ा है वो है 2 crore 15 lakhs, और जो मैंने बाहर के लोगों का पैसा अटकाया है, like the outstanding of my suppliers or the bank working capital limit, ये सब कितना है 1 crore 33 lakhs. So net I have invested 81 lakh 47,000 in my day-to-day working capital requirement. So this is the ratio which bank calculates to decide whether you are eligible for working capital limit. Again, I am practically explaining you that whenever we meet some client and they share their financials, we see that their current assets and their current liabilities are almost equal. So if their current assets are 2 CR, their current liabilities are also 2 CR. So what does that mean? And still they expect that they want some working capital funding from bank. How bank will fund? Bank will say, अरे आपका 2 रुपया अगर करंट असेट में अटका है तो आपने भी सामने वाले का 2 रुपया अटकाया है, राइट? आपका पैसा लगा कहाँ है? डे टू डे ऑपरेशंस में या डे टू डे वर्किंग कैपिटल में आपका पैसा लगा ही कहाँ है? Your current assets are say 2 CR and your current liabilities are also 2 CR. That means your working capital is zero. Means you don't need any funding for your day to day operations, क्योंकि आपने सामने वाले का भी पैसा उतना ही अटका है जितना आपका अटका है. तो आपका गैप है किधर? आपका इन्वेस्टमेंट है किधर वर्किंग कैपिटल के लिए, राइट? So that's why this particular calculation is very important. Every time as a owner, we always suggest that whenever your CA is finalizing your balance sheet, you should always look at all these critical aspects. If you have availed some working capital limit from bank, you should ensure that your balance sheet reflects this working capital vis-a-vis your working capital limit. So typically ये limit कैसे calculate करता है bank? So bank calculates working capital in this way, and then it says कि आपका 81 लाख रुपया वर्किंग कैपिटल में अटका है. We will give you 75% of this as a limit, and 25% is your contribution. This is how bank provide us a working capital limit. So that's why it is very important that we know ki whether we have actually invested in working capital or not. Got my point? So accordingly, this current ratio is calculated, which is again with respect to this working capital. So how it is calculated? My current assets as on the date of balance sheet divided by current liabilities. So what does this indicate? That if I owe 1 rupee to outside world, I am expecting 1 rupee 61 paise from outside world. Got it? If I owe, मुझे अगर बाहर 1 रुपया लोगों को देना है तो मुझे बाहर से 1 रुपया 61 पैसे लेना है. So that means to the tune of 61 paise, I have over invested in my day-to-day operations. And इसके लिए I approach my bank कि ये जो 61 पैसे मैंने ज्यादा अटकाए हैं ना, उसके लिए आप मुझे working capital limit दो, because this is a gap between my operating cycle, right? So higher the ratio, better the short-term liquidity position. Means what? कि अगर ये 2:1 आता है, मतलब क्या? कि I have 1 rupee to be paid, but I have 2 rupees to be recovered from the market or from the outside world or from my customers, right? So considering this current ratio, bank decides कि आपको working capital limit देना चाहिए कि नहीं देना चाहिए. Okay? Now this is liquid ratio, maybe or this is also called acid test ratio. So typically again it's kind of current ratio only. इसमें सिर्फ current assets से stock को हटा देते हैं, because stock is not considered as a most liquid item, right? Stock immediately मैं आज के आज बेच दूं ऐसे नहीं हो सकता, right? अगर it's a raw material stock, unless I process it, unless I convert it into finished goods, I won't be able to sell it. So generally ये रेशियो जो बोलते हैं इसको लिक्विड रेशियो और एसिड टेस्ट रेशियो बोलते हैं कि आज के आज मुझे अगर कुछ पैसे चाहिए, कुछ अर्जेंसी आ गई, if there is some emergency and I want liquid fund, whether I have that liquidity in my business, ये देखने के लिए this liquid ratio is calculated. Now this is again very important. जैसे हमने बात की थी कि working capital cycle is dependent on what? Working capital cycle is dependent on for how many days I am going to maintain my stock, for how many days I am allowing my customers to pay, for how many days my suppliers are allowing me to pay, right? And whether it is actually happening. So this is all calculated by either calculating debtors holding period, stock holding period and creditors holding period. Means what? कि जैसे अभी हमने डिस्कस किया था कि आई एम सप्लाइंग टू महिंद्रा एंड महिंद्रा एंड आई हैव अ क्रेडिट टर्म ऑफ 60 days, राइट? मींस व्हाट? दैट इफ आई supply today, after 60 days, Mahindra will pay me. But whether practically I am getting money in 60 days or not, if I don't get in 60 days, what is going to happen? As we discussed, my working capital cycle will get stretched. मेरा liquidity कम होगा. मेरा overall manufacturing will get affected because I may not be able to get my material in time, and that will affect my overall business cycle, right? So this particular debtors holding period is nothing but जो हमारे कस्टमर से पैसा आना है divided by sales converted into days. So ये 31st मार्च का मेरा पोजीशन है. 31st मार्च को मेरे कस्टमर से इतना पैसा आना था, मेरा साल भर का सेल इतना हुआ है, उसको अगर मैंने डेज में कन्वर्ट किया तो वो कितना आया 101.50 डेज, राइट? बट मेरा क्रेडिट टर्म क्या है? सी इफ माय क्रेडिट टर्म इज ओनली 60 डेज और 90 डेज मींस व्हाट? माय रिकवरी साइकिल इज वीक. सो आफ्टर कैलकुलेटिंग दिस पर्टिकुलर डेज आई कैन आस्क माय रिकवरी टीम कि यू आर नॉट परफॉर्मिंग वेल, राइट? हमारा टर्म्स अगर 60 डेज है, 90 डेज है, व्हाई आई एम हैविंग 101 डेज आउटस्टैंडिंग? You can question your recovery team, but when only if you calculate the period in this way, right? So if my days are more than my recovery period, again as I mentioned, I will have a very impact on my working capital. Similarly, stock holding period. So stock divided by my sales converted into number of days. So what does this particular indicate? That at any point in time, I maintain a stock of 5.25 days. मतलब मेरा अगर पर डे का स्टॉक x है तो 5 दिन का स्टॉक मैं मेरे स्टॉक में रखता हूं, राइट? Creditors holding period. Creditors are nothing but my suppliers who are supplying me raw material or other consumables. So again, how I have calculated this? Outstanding as on 31st March divided by my total purchases for the year. So वो कितना आया? 93 days. So suppose I have a 60 days credit term. What does this indicate? That I am not paying my suppliers in time. मेरा term 60 days का है, but मैं 93 days तक उनको रोक के रख रहा हूँ, उनका पेमेंट नहीं कर रहा हूँ. और ये क्यों हो रहा होगा? Naturally, because I am not able to recover from my customer, I am not able to pay my supplier in time. So you can see the effect that if you don't recover in time, you are not going to pay in time. So ultimately what will happen? This will create a bad impression in the market, right? A new customer may not come to you, or new supplier may not come to you, because he will know that your history is not good. You are not a good pay master. You are not a timely pay master, right? And now this we have put it as a summary that if I want to analyze a working capital cycle of ABC Limited, what I can see. So if you see the table, these are actual days which we calculated just now. So I maintain a stock of 5.25 days. My customer outstanding is 101.50 days. So my gross working capital days are 106. And I hold my creditors up to 93 days. Why it is say money finance? Because ultimately by holding my creditors, what I am doing, ultimately I am taking a finance from them, right? Indirectly, I am not paying my suppliers in time. So indirectly, my suppliers are financing my business. So that's why the term money finance is used. And here money blocked is used, right? Because my funds are actually blocked. So this is my working capital of net working capital of 13.75 days. As against that, what I had expected कि मैं 7 दिन का स्टॉक रखूंगा, मैं 45 डेज में मेरे कस्टमर्स से रिकवरी लाऊंगा और मैं 30 डेज में मेरे सप्लायर्स को पेमेंट करूंगा. So my net working capital I had expected of 22 days, but actually this is 13.75. Okay, so this is how one needs to analyze their working capital, that what was planned in your project report and what is actually happening. So that's why this particular analysis gives a clear picture whether you are on the right track, whether your day-to-day operations are proper, whether your recovery cycle is right, whether your supplier payments are in time. This all is reflected in this particular analysis. And that's why I spent more time on this, because this is very important one to understand. Then this is one more ratio, return on capital employed. Typically, investors look into that if they invest in your business, they will come on board as a shareholder. So against their shareholder, what is the net profit which is earned? So this is nothing but a return on capital employed. So in this particular case, the return on capital employed is 7.22%. Again, you can compare this particular ratio with your competitors. If their ratio is more, that means your capital is not properly employed or you have invested more in your business, right? So again, just to conclude on this balance sheet analysis, so whenever we want to do analysis of our balance sheet in this manner, either we should do analysis with our past years, and parallelly we can get our competitors' financials. So if it's a private limited company, we can easily get competitors' financials from Register of Companies website, and we can compare that what are their key ratios, what are our key ratios, and where our ratios are not at par with our competitors, and what is the reason. We can do that analysis. Next comes cash flow statement. So again, this is very important part of the financial statements, which one needs to look into. Generally, when we talk about financial statements, people only know profit and loss and balance sheet. Generally, this particular statement is not considered, but it is also very important statement. Just to give a very briefly, I will explain this. So cash flow is nothing but, as name suggests, the flow of funds in the business. So cash means not physical cash, especially whatever funds which are coming by RTGS, NEFT, now Phone Pay, Google Pay, whatever into your business is inflow, and whatever payment you are doing. So you are paying to suppliers, you are paying to workers, you are paying to employees, you are making your EMI payment. All this is nothing but outflows. So this particular inflow and outflow is divided into three parts: operating activities, investing activities, and financing activities. Okay, so let's briefly run through this. So operating activities is nothing but your main operation of the business. Say auto component I am manufacturing. So I am procuring raw material, I am procuring bought out components, I am making payment to my supplier, I am making payment to my workers, right? I am doing sales to my customer. So all this will come under operating activities, the activities which are related to my main business operations. Next come investing activities. Basically investment. So I have a surplus profit in my business. What I do, I invest in some other businesses, example, or I invest in mutual funds, I invest in equity shares, right? Even the investment which I do in my fixed assets, if I want to go for expansion, I buy new plant and machinery. So that investment will come under investing activities. So all such cash inflow or cash outflow is reflected under investing activities. And lastly, financing activities. So I have availed a loan from bank, I'm making regular EMI payment, right? Or I have issued a shares, fresh shares, a new investor has come on board, so I have issued shares to them. Now what is debenture? Debentures is also loan type instrument. So if any private investor is coming on board, we can issue a debentures from a company. So or on shares I have declared dividend, so I am, as a company, I am paying dividend to my shareholders. So all these activities will come under financing activities. So this ends our discussion on the financial statements part. So we discuss about profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. So whenever you read any financial statement, please do read all these three financial statements, because these all form part of the financial statements, and analysis of all these three statements is very critical. Now we will talk about Startup India. So what was Startup India? It was an initiative of Government of India to catalyze the startup culture and build a strong inclusive ecosystem for innovation and entrepreneurship. So main intention of launching the startup initiative was to supporting the entrepreneurs in India, so that India should not be a job seeker. It should become a job creator. So from that point of view, this scheme was introduced. The main intention was the promotion of startups, generation of employment, and wealth creation. Right? Now, what are the key points? Why startup has got a separate recognition or edge over others, right? So we can see that for startups, the government has given a lot of relaxation. So one of the relaxation is for almost 9 labor and environmental laws, there is a self-certified compliance which is allowed, right? Through a mobile app. No inspections will be conducted in case of the labor laws for a period of 3 years. Okay. In case of patent, government has given a subsidy so that it will bear the cost for patents, trademarks, designs. Almost 80% rebate it has given. And further, say if I am filing a patent application as a startup, and if there is a regular company which is also filing a similar patent application, generally the preference will be given to a startup patent application first, so that age is there for a startup. Then the most important benefit is the tax exemption. So there is an income tax exemption for a period of 3 years, but provided there is a caveat that you are not supposed to declare dividend and take out profit from your business. So you are supposed to retain your profit from the business for further expansion, for further growth. Then only you will be able to avail this income tax exemption benefit of 3 years. There is also one capital gains benefit. So some couple of years back, there was a huge debate because generally startups get very good valuations and they get investments at much premium, and income tax was planning to tax that premium. So now it has been settled that all such investments which are coming to startups which are above their fair market value won't be taxed. So there is a huge relief and there won't be any capital gains tax. This particular important aspect for startup is public procurement norms. So if you are a registered startup, generally in case of public sector undertakings or state government, central government procurement, there is a criteria of prior experience, or there is sometimes turnover criteria which requires to be fulfilled. But if you are a registered startup, even if you are a new startup, if you are a manufacturing startup, then this criteria won't be applicable to you and you are eligible for public procurement under the central government, state government or PSU norms. One more important point is a faster exit. So typically in case of startup, the winding up procedures are much lenient. So under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Bill, which was introduced in 2015, there is a provision has been made that a startup can wind up their operations within a 90 days period as a voluntary wind up. Next, first we will discuss what is the eligibility for startup. So who is a eligible startup? Who can be called as a startup, right? That is very important. So any entity which has not completed a period of 10 years from the date of its incorporation or registration can qualify as a startup. Second, it can be a private limited company, it can be a limited liability partnership, or it can be a partnership firm. So only these 3 entity forms are allowed under a startup registration. The entity should not have exceeded 100 crore turnover for any of the financial years since its incorporation. The most important criteria that if you want to really qualify as a startup, you should be working towards innovation, development or improvement of products, so which might be a product efficiency, the process efficiency, right? Or it has some scalable business model with high potential for employment generation or wealth creation. So this is a very important criteria if you really want to get eligible under startup. And first and foremost, it should not be formed by splitting up or reconstructing an existing business. So this is very important. It has to be a new venture. It can't be a restructured or a split of an existing venture, right? Now we will see that typically we get a lot of questions that which structure is ideal, right? Whether we should go for private limited company, whether we should go for limited liability partnership, or we should go for a regular partnership firm. So now we are going to see a quick comparison of all these three entity forms. So in case of private limited company or LLP, you need to have minimum 2 members, maximum 200. In case of partnership, 2 or max 20. Now, requirement of annual compliance. In case of private limited company, compliance is little high. Like it has to do annual return, it has to hold board meetings, the annual general meetings of its shareholders. Audit is mandatory. So in case of private limited company, there are 2 audits. One is as per the Companies Act, under which the company is getting incorporated. And if your turnover exceeds a threshold limit, you are also required to do audit under Income Tax Act. So in case of private limited company, there are 2 audits. In case of limited liability partnership, audit is applicable only if your contribution is more than 25 lakhs and turnover exceeds rupees 40 lakhs. Otherwise, there are some provisions under which you can go for presumptive taxation. In case of partnership, again, it is having only one audit under Income Tax Act. There is no separate audit under the Partnership Act, right? Cost of formation. Now, even a company formation has become quite easy and simple process, but still, yes, the cost is a little more in case of private limited company compared to LLP and partnership firm. Creation. This is very important. Partnership is created by contract. So though it may regulated under Partnership Act, but it is created by a contract entered into between partners. In case of private limited company, it is created by Companies Act. In case of LLP, it is created by LLP Act. Perpetual succession. This is very important. In case of private limited company, it has got a perpetual succession. It has a separate legal independent status. In other 2 cases, it does not have. Constitutional documents. So memorandum of association and articles of association are the constitutional documents of private limited company. In case of LLP, it's a LLP agreement. In case of partnership firm, it's a partnership deed. Separate legal entity. Private limited and LLP are treated as separate legal entities. Partnership firm is not treated as a separate legal entity, and that's why it is very important that in case of private limited company and limited liability partnership, the liability of directors or the liability of partners in LLP remains to the extent of their investment in those ventures. So they have a limited liability. But in case of partnership firm, it has got unlimited liability, and this is very important because if there are any issues and if you face any financial consequences or some legal penalties, even in case of partnership, the partners will have to pay those penalties or dues from their own sources. So that's why partnership firm has got a higher risk because it has got unlimited liability. Governing Act, we already discussed that. Companies Act 2013 for private limited company, LLP Act 2008 for LLP, and Partnership Act 1932 for partnership firm. The most attractive amendment which has come recently in case of taxation under Income Tax Act is earlier partnership. In case of private limited company, earlier it was taxed at 30%, but slowly now the rate has been reduced to 22%. So with effective rate becomes 25% after addition of surcharge and education cess. And especially in last year, a new amendment has come whereby if a new manufacturing company is set up as a private limited company, the taxation rate is only 15%, and after addition of surcharge and other cess, it becomes 17%. So this is the biggest relief which is given to private limited company. So if you compare with LLP, it is still at 30%. For partnership firm, it is still at 30%. So there is a direct saving of almost 13% if you are a manufacturing private limited company, or 8% if you are a regular company which is incorporated before the threshold which was amended. So this is the biggest relief given to private limited company, especially to boost incorporation of private limited companies. Voting rights, again, for private limited company, it is based on the number of shares held. In case of LLP, it is as per LLP agreement, and partnership firm, it is as per partnership deed. Identification number. So in case of private limited company, every director has DIN. LLP, every designated partner has DPIN. And in case of partnership firm, there is no separate identification number obtained. So if we look at the overall scenario, if we look at the comparative analysis, we can see that there is always a benefit to form a private limited company. And what are the broad benefits? So typically, if we talk about a startup, for them incorporating a private limited company is always a wise decision. So typically, again I said, first of all, private limited company has got a limited liability. So your liability is limited to the extent of your investment in that particular company. It will not come to your personal assets. Again, there are certain provisions whereby even if there is a willful default, or if it is a deliberate fraud done by the promoters, the way we are witnessing some right now in India. Typically, there are provisions to reach to the personal assets of the promoters, but in general sense, if you have followed due diligence, if you are doing business in good sense, the liability won't come to your personal assets. Access to funding. So typically, when we are talking about startup, if you are a private limited company, access to funding is easy. The investors can come on board as a investor in the form of share capital, or you can issue them preference share capital, which is again another form of share capital. You can issue them debenture. So there are various options available in case of a private limited company to take any investor on board. Banks look at private limited companies more positively. Why? Because private limited companies do a lot of compliances. Their records are available with register of companies, so anybody can check the records of the company. So there is more transparency in case of private limited company. So banks also prefer to fund private limited companies. There is a greater credibility. Typically, if you are a startup and you are eyeing on having some strategic association with foreign investors or some foreign collaboration, typically if you are a private limited company, it will give you more weightage, because globally private limited companies are considered to be doing a lot of corporate governance compliance, and to that extent they are looked at with greater credibility. Again, in case of startup, there is a easy exit. So this is very good advantage, because in case of regular private limited companies, winding up is a very tedious process. You have to file a application in court, and court gives the decision and all. So it's a tedious process for a regular private limited company. But for startup, there is a specific provision for 90 days wind up. Then again, as a private limited company, you can expand internationally very fast. You have you get a lot of potential. You have multiple opportunities. So considering all this, considering the perpetual existence, considering the options available to raise funds, private limited company is always a better option to go for a startup. And now, what are the steps to register as a startup? So we will quickly go through that. So first, as we discussed, you have to incorporate your business. So we have three options, as we already discussed: private limited company, LLP, or partnership firm. So you have to go for that, and you have to get the certificate of registration. Then you can apply on the Startup India portal. So it's total online process. So you can apply online. So there are a lot of documents to be uploaded. We will see that to go for startup registration. This is very important. So you have to take a call whether you really want to avail tax benefit, because as I already mentioned, if you want to avail tax benefit, you are not allowed to withdraw profits from the business. You are not allowed to withdraw profit in the form of dividend for at least 3 years. So that's why it's an option given to you whether you want to avail tax benefit or not. You have to self-certify. So as we already discussed, there are some 9 labor laws and environmental laws wherein self-certification is possible. So you have to self-certify. And finally, after your application is approved, you get a recognition number. So we will just see that in detail. So first step, to incorporate your venture, right? To obtain registration certificate, to obtain PAN, right? Then step 2 is you have to register as a startup. So in that you have to submit some documents. One document is your registration certificate, your PAN number, the details of the directors, and very important is your proof of concept, or we also call it as a pitch deck, right? If you have applied for patent or trademark, that particular details. And there are a lot of documents to be uploaded. So letter of recommendation or support, if it is supported by some incubator or that letter, then your registration, your business description. Then again, whether you want to avail exemption or not, that you have to mention. In that case, it has to be certified by interministerial board. So if you really want to apply for tax benefit, you have to get this particular interministerial board approval. Then what you need to self-certify, that first you have to register your startup. Then again, all these conditions which are required, that you have to self-certify that your business is not incorporated before 5 years, your turnover must be less than 25 crores per year. Now this criteria has been changed. Now it is 100 crores per year. Innovation is must. This is very important. Your business, your activity, what you are doing, there has to be some innovation. And your business must not be as a result of reconstruction. As we discussed, it should not be an existing business and restructured or any splitting of an existing business. So all this declaration has to be done. Then your application is scrutinized, and within 2 days you get approval. If it is found that your application has got some wrong information or forged information, then you are liable to a fine of 50% of your paid up capital, with a minimum fine of rupees 25,000. So this is how the entire process of startup happens, and definitely one can avail the benefits of startup provided we fulfill all those conditions. So this ends my presentation, and I think we can have question answers.
Yogesh, can I ask a question? I think you're on mute.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, can I ask a question, Yogesh?
Hey, am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
You can ask.
Let Harshali go first, and I'll go next.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Rohit,
So I would like to ask one question. Whether forward integration integration will be considered as a startup?
Forward integration in the can you elaborate in giving some?
Sir, like I'm having currently I'm running a business of raw material manufacturing, and I want to start new unit under startup as a forward integration. I want to manufacture my own products out of that existing business. My existing business is manufacturing of raw material.
Okay.
Okay. So can I go for? Yes, sir.
Yeah, no. So typically, see, as I already explained, there has to be some innovation. So, for example, say when Ola came into the market, right? So it was a innovation at that time because it was first concept of cab aggregator came in, right?
Right.
So Ola might came as a claim that they are a startup, but then now Uber and then all other who are coming as a cab aggregator, they can't claim because that concept is already in the market. So
Okay.
typically, when you talk about forward integration, are you doing anything different from what is already happening in the market? Are you going to do some process improvement? Are you going to do some energy saving? You know, all those aspects have to be checked, and that's why all these incubators come into the picture. They help to or they guide you whether this concept can be really qualified as startup or not.
Okay. If it is energy saving concept and if it is the existing concept, it will be treated as a startup?
Energy saving, but whether it is already in the market. If it is already
Okay.
in the market, I feel it will be difficult.
Okay.
Because see, energy saving, okay, I agree with you that one criteria you have fulfilled, but whether it is novice, whether it's a new concept, whether it has already not been introduced by anybody,
Okay. Okay.
that they will check.
Okay, so thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, Rohit.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my question, Prasanna, was around the non-current, non-tangible assets,
Okay.
where you had called out intellectual property.
Right.
So how do you evaluate that?
See, in case of valuation of IPR, now there are a lot of valuation methods which are provided. So, which are internationally available methods. Or typically, in case of, I will just share with you, our Chartered Accountants Institute has come up with a separate course on valuation. So, in which they teach us various different methods which can be used for different types of valuations. So accordingly, you have to do a valuation done of your concept, and then you can take it up. So to be very frank, there is no yardstick I will say for do any IPR valuation. It all depends upon what is the potential of that particular product or that particular concept in the market, how you will be able to exploit that, what is the life of that particular innovation. So everything will depend on that. So accordingly, you can do a IPR valuation, and maybe based on that valuation report, you can recognize that value in your books, and which you will amortize over a period of useful life. So if you expect that this particular IPR has got say 10 years life, so accordingly you can amortize over a period of 10 years in your books.
Got it.
I
Thank
hope
you.
I think it is clear.
Yeah. I think I need to study more.
Yeah, it's a huge valuation is a huge subject. To be very frank with you, we all chartered accountants see a lot of potential in valuation, but unfortunately, right now after COVID, there is no valuation course which is declared by our institute. So we are also desperately waiting for the same. There are private valuation courses available, and I will definitely recommend if somebody wants to really pursue this as a career, it has got a tremendous potential because going forward, valuation will have a tremendous potential because everywhere you will need valuation. So be it shares, be it properties, be it debentures issue, preference shares issue, now valuation will be mandatory.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
So, Prasanna,
Okay,
you
I
have
will
one poll.
okay, I will see the chat box.
Prasanna, one thing, I was having a poll. So,
Okay.
can we launch it right now?
Yeah, please.
Yes. So, all the audience and participants, you can rate the session right now. I'm launching one poll. Just rate how you liked it.
Yogesh, can I ask my question?
Mandar, just a sec. After this
Yeah.
poll.
No problem.
Dear participants, please rate the session. So thank you all for rating the poll. You can go ahead, Manda.
Okay. Good afternoon, sir. I hope I'm audible.
Good afternoon. Yeah, very much. Please go ahead.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for this amazing session. Actually, majority of the doubts you have solved, and the way of looking at this balance sheet has now tremendously changed.
Great.
Myself, Mandar Patil, and actually, I have already registered my startup on Startup India, and I have registered it as an OPC, that is one person company private limited. And I do have the DPIIT registration recognition, as well as I also have got funding for the patent registration from the startup. Now, basically, currently my situation is we are in the testing phase, and some partners have also joined me. Now, this is a practical query that we are facing, where we wanted to convert that startup into a private limited, like where partners can join. So
Right.
I was just asking whether is it possible.
I think conversion of OPC into private limited is possible, but to be very frank, procedurally, I will have to come back to you because I have a company secretary who does all these procedural formalities. And are there any restrictions on conversion front? I will have to really check. I suggest maybe we can connect offline and take this forward.
Yeah, very much, no problem.
Sure. So I think so we can definitely take this up, and I can guide you on that front. Maybe I will share my contact number in the chat box so that anybody can connect on one-to-one also with me.
Okay.
In fact,
Thank you very much.
what you should do, Yogesh, is after this call is over, we should share Prasanna's contact details with all the participants. So they can reach out to him via either phone or email to get any assistance they need for their starters or anything that they are already doing but they need support with.
Great, Rohit. Good. That can be done.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think just couple of questions I can see in the chat box. I will just quickly take this. So Dhanraj is asking finance from banks for different firms. Now, typically, I'm not really able to understand exactly what you want to ask. Any specific finance you are looking at? Can you elaborate? Hello, Mr. Dhanraj, are you there? Okay, I think he might not be there. Any taxation benefits if one partner is physically? No, I think Aniket has already replied. There is no per se benefit to a partnership. Maybe that partner may get a income tax benefit. There is a specific section under Section 80, whereby a physically handicapped certificate is there, and you can get an additional deduction from your income tax payment. Yeah, I think Mr. Dhanraj. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Yeah, tell me.
Yes, I'm asking for that. If I'm going for some startup, I will get some finance from a bank. Suppose that I learned that I have 20% of the finance with me, and I get the 80% from the bank. Is it right or something different?
No, your voice is little cracking. Can you come back again?
Actually, sir, I'm calling regarding that finance. Means, I get finance for the business from the bank.
See, per se, now all banks have internal directives to fund startups, but typically what happens is bank generally follow their regular appraisal norms. So even if it's a startup now, for uh, uh, startup or even any new entrepreneur who is coming up with a new business, the government has come up a CGT MSc scheme wherein up to 2 CR, the collateral-free loans can be provided to any new business or any budding business. But practically, banks are taking a very conservative view, especially after this COVID scenario. Uh, Conceptually, though, you might have a very good concept, very novel concept, even if you are a DIPP registered startup, but typically banks, they follow their own norms and they fund startup, but then they generally don't take a bigger exposure. So typically based on your concepts, maybe up to 25 lakhs, 50 lakhs funding they may provide. And typically how you are presenting your project report, to whom you are going to provide your product or service, if it's a renowned name and all. So maybe in that case your proposal may be considered, but otherwise practically it becomes really very difficult, and startups generally have to go for private funding. Banks generally don't entertain startup projects. There are very few banks or private banks they might consider, especially technology based startups. Unless they understand the technology, it becomes very difficult to convince. So our practical experience is it's very difficult to get funding from bank. But yes, if your concept is good, your paperwork is good, your pitch deck is good, you can definitely try and you may succeed. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
So my question is this: say for example, for college student, if some college students are having idea, if they have developed a product, but the company is not registered, so is there any alternative to apply a Startup India or some or?
No, you have to have a registration done, because the starting point is having some registration, either LLP, partnership firm, or private limited company. So typically, as I mentioned, if your concept is now reached the commercial exploitation stage, now you may register an entity and then go for a formal startup registration.
Okay, and the second question is that how much cost it will? Say for example, I want to register for LLP.
Now it depends on how much capital, because see, typically what happens is even if it's a private limited company or LLB, the registration cost mainly it depends on the stamp duty which you have to pay to the government, and it depends on your capital contribution. So it all depends on your capital contribution, and accordingly your registration cost will vary. It also depends on the number of partners. So naturally, if there are say 10 partners, so you have to get 10 DPIN. So all it depends on the number of partners or number of shareholder directors and the capital. But typically, the overall cost is ranges from 25 to 30,000 initial cost if you are going for a basic initial capital. And then as you want to increase your capital, then as per whatever increase you want to do in your capital, you will have to pay additional stamp duty and comply the procedural formalities.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Anybody?
So just to add to Bhushan's question,
Yeah.
if I am a student, nothing stops me from registering a company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Above 18 is allowed.
Okay. So I don't have to be fully employed or full-time employed into the business. If I want to register a company, I can just register a company.
Yes.
ROC doesn't care about that.
That's right. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
So Prasanna, might be we are at the end of our program.
Okay.
So let's conclude. Prasanna, that was a wonderful session and it was very informative. Thank you, DIEMS and Dr. Ulla Shirukar for coordinating of the event. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I am looking forward to meet you in the coming webinar, and so stay tuned. Goodbye.